An old man sits on a rock in the middle of a penal colony. The Aegean Sea crashing against black volcanic stone, creating a tidy symbol of the whole church. And there is truth to that symmetry. But if you look closer at the architecture of the ancient world, they are prophesying. They are declaring the reality of God's rule over a chaotic world. And they are doing it with vibration. The 24 priestly Mishmar, the guards, protect the physical space with iron keys and closed gates. The 24 divisions of singers protect the atmospheric space. When a division finishes its week of service, their voices are hoarse. Their fingers are calloused from striking the heavy strings. The physical toll of the song is just as heavy as the physical toll of the slaughter. For 1,000 years, this is the pattern, 24 and 24. The flesh and the spirit, the blade and the harp, both required to keep the presence of God anchored in the city of David. But why that specific number? Why 24? Why not 50 groups? Or 100? To understand why David was obsessed with this exact configuration, you cannot just look at the total head count. You have to look at the math hiding quietly inside the choir. Look at the math. Look at the specific geometry hiding inside the choir. 12 men in every single group. 24 groups in total. In the ancient biblical mind, 12 is never a random integer. It is the number of cosmic governance. It is the number of totality. Count the tribes of Israel. 12. Count the stones on the high priest's heavy linen breastpiece. 12 gems emerald, onyx, amethyst, pressing against his chest. At the blueprints of a temple that no longer exists. At the way a king divided a priesthood 1,000 years earlier, you start to see something. Count the loaves of bread resting in the dark on the golden table. 12 loaves baking on hot stones. Replaced every Sabbath. Count the months in the ancient lunar cycle. 12. 12 is the blueprint of authority. It represents the people of God organized, recognized, and established. But David does not stop at 12. He doubles the architecture. 24. Why? Because the temple is a hybrid space. It is the collision point of two realms, the visible and the invisible, heaven and earth. By doubling the number of governance, the temple administration makes a massive theological claim. It claims that what happens on the white limestone of Mount Moriah is perfectly locked with what is happening above the sky. The earthly 12 matches a heavenly 12. The visible authority anchors to an invisible authority. The math is not a coincidence. It is a mirror. The 24 divisions are not a human invention. They are a localized expression of a cosmic reality for 1,000 years. This mathematical engine runs. The guards lock the heavy gates. The singers strike the strings. The 24 keep watch. The temple stands. The temple falls. Babylon brings the fire. The carved cedar burns. The heavy gold melts into the cracks of the stone floor. Years later, they rebuild it. The 24 divisions return. The engine restarts. Then Rome marches in. More fire. More blood. The simple math equation completely misses. 24 is not a head count. It is the blueprint of unceasing access. The massive stones are thrown down into the Kidron Valley. The earthly sanctuary is shattered for the final time. The smoke clears. The music dies. The 24 earthly watches are permanently broken. But the number does not disappear. It simply changes location, and decades after the Roman fires go out, an exiled fisherman on a prison island looks through a tear in the sky and sees exactly where it went. John stands on the black volcanic rock. The earthly temple is gone. The heavy limestone blocks in Jerusalem are still smoking in his memory. The massive bronze sea is melted down. The golden lampstands are carried off as Roman plunder. The 24 earthly watches are permanently broken. But a door opens in the sky. He looks through the tear in the atmosphere. The light is blinding colors of sardius and emerald, bleeding together around a central seat of power. The floor is a sea of glass, smooth and cold as winter ice. The air shakes with a thunder so loud it rattles his ribs. And, circling the center, he sees them. 24 thrones, 24 crowns, 24 elders. Most people read Revelation chapter 4 and immediately treat it like a theological puzzle. They try to identify the faces. Are they celestial beings? Are they the 12 Old Testament patriarchs added to the 12 New Testament apostles? The real question of this vision isn't just who these elders are. It's this: why are there exactly 24? The text does not name them, but it does give them a title. The word John uses to describe them is the Greek presbyteros. It is the word for an elder, a representative, someone appointed to stand and govern on behalf of a much larger group. But John is not describing a heavenly city council. He is a Jewish man of the 1st century who knows exactly what 24 representatives circling the presence of God signifies. He knows the administrative ledger of 1 Chronicles. He knows the math of the sanctuary. The 24 elders are not a random apocalyptic headcount. They are the ultimate mishmar. They are the unbroken watch. Look at what these elders are holding in their hands just one chapter later in Revelation 5. They are holding golden bowls full of incense, which John says are the prayers of the saints. And they are holding harps. The incense and the harp. The priest and the singer. The earthly temple in Jerusalem is shattered. But John realizes the engine never actually stopped. The 24 divisions are still running. The blueprint has simply returned to its origin. Only now. They are not operating in earthly shifts. The heavenly 24 do not get tired. They do not need to hand over heavy iron keys at sunset. They do not need a Sabbath rest from the slaughter. The answer changes how you view the throne of God. We are a species accustomed to waiting in line, hoping the office is open. They cast their crowns on the glassy floor. They pick them up. They sing. They keep the watch. The earthly 24 was just a shadow. The heavenly 24 is the substance. For 1,000 years, humanity tried to host the presence of God using exhausted human bodies, rotating every 7 days just to keep the fire alive. But on the island of Patmos, the curtain is pulled back. The fire is eternal. The watch is permanent. The access is secured by a priesthood that does not sleep. But this is where the vision stops being ancient history, because the author of the New Testament makes a terrifying, beautiful claim about where you are actually standing right now. You are probably exhausted. You wake up in the dark. You force your heavy eyes open. You read the ancient texts. You form the prayers. You try to maintain the schedule. You treat your devotion like a shift on the Temple Mount. You think the connection depends on your vigilance. You act like a phantom 25th division. You grip the heavy iron keys. You pace the cold limestone. You watch the fire on the bronze altar. You panic when the embers burn low. You smell the cedar smoke fading, and you rush to throw on more wood. You try to manufacture the vibration. You try to strike the 10 strings. You try to force a frequency of worship when your lungs are completely empty, praying we catch the king in a favorable mood. We think of the divine presence as a place with business hours, a sanctuary that opens. You treat your spiritual life like a cosmic quota you have to meet by sundown. You believe that if you stop singing, the music of heaven stops playing. You believe that if you fall asleep, the divine presence withdraws. Most people live their faith in a constant state of spiritual adrenaline. They are terrified of dropping the ball. They are terrified of breaking the chain. They measure their spiritual health by how well they manage the flames. But look up at the tear in the sky. Look at the glass floor. Look at the 24 thrones. The watch is completely covered. The elders are seated. The white linen is unstained. The golden crowns flash in the emerald light. The bowls of incense are overflowing. The air is thick with a song that does not require your breath. Your devotion is not the engine. It is the echo. Your prayers are not the primary fire. They are the incense added to the golden bowls, already burning in the hands of the 24. When your voice cracks, the heavenly choir does not miss a beat. When your knees hit the hard floor in pure exhaustion, the watch is not broken. When you cannot find a single word to say in the silence of your own room, the 24 are already speaking on your behalf. You do not have to guard the perimeter. You do not have to keep the Creator awake. You do not have to be the 25th division on Sunday mornings and closes when the music stops. But the number 24 diagnoses a profound misunderstanding in how we relate to the Creator of the universe. This is not a demand for better performance. This is the end of your grueling shift. God does not need your frantic maintenance. He already has 24 elders holding the line. He already has the perfect mishmar surrounding the throne. The defensive perimeter is permanently secure. The cosmic administration is running in flawless, unbroken symmetry. But stepping down from the altar changes everything about how you actually enter the room. If you are no longer the exhausted priest pacing the courtyard, and if you are no longer the guard carrying the heavy iron keys, how do the massive bronze doors actually open for you? Look at the architectural logic of the book of Hebrews. The writer of this letter is intimately familiar with the earthly temple system. He knows about the 24 divisions. He knows about the Mishmar. He watches the descendants of Aaron rotating in and out of the city, keeping the massive engine running. And he diagnoses a fatal flaw in the design. The earthly 24 were beautiful, but they were the ultimate proof of distance. If a space requires guards, the perimeter is restricted. If the fire requires constant maintenance, the connection is fragile. The heavy veil hanging in the center of the temple was not just a decoration. It was a warning woven in blue, purple, and scarlet thread. It shifts the entire landscape of your access to the divine, moving it from a sporadic invitation to a permanent, unbroken rhythm, thick as a man's hand, telling humanity to keep their distance. The system of 24 watches was a machine built for exclusion. Then, the sky goes dark on a Friday afternoon. A different kind of priest hangs on Roman wood. He does not hold a bronze knife or a golden bowl. He bleeds out on a cross just outside the city walls. And when his lungs empty for the final time, the gospel writers record a very specific architectural detail. The veil tears from top to bottom. The heavy fabric rips open in the dark. The sound of tearing linen echoes through the holy place. The ancient boundary line collapses. But here is what most people miss about that afternoon in Jerusalem. When the veil tears on earth, it reveals an empty room. The Ark of the Covenant had been missing for centuries by the time Jesus died. The earthly epicenter was vacant. The tearing of the veil was not an invitation into a limestone box. It was the final retirement of the earthly replica. The author of Hebrews makes the staggering claim that Jesus did not enter a sanctuary made with human hands. He entered the blueprint. He bypassed the earthly rotation. He bypassed the exhausted guards with their iron keys. He walked directly into the throne room. To feel the weight of this number, you have to leave the island of Patmos. You have to travel back 1,000 years with the sea of glass, the emerald light, and the 24 elders. Notice the physical posture of the ancient earthly priests. They are always standing. The author of Hebrews points out that every priest stands daily at his service, offering the same sacrifices again and again. There were no chairs in the earthly courtyard. The work was never done. But look at the 24 elders in John's vision on Patmos. They are sitting on 24 thrones. The posture changes everything. Standing means the work is ongoing. Sitting means the work is finished. The heavenly 24 are not a barricade. They are a guarantee. They are the permanent witnesses that the sacrifice is sufficient. The incense is acceptable, and the access is secured forever. You do not need a lot to fall with your name on it to enter. You have been granted the kind of unbroken access that the ancient sons of Aaron could only dream of as they shivered in the cold courtyard. But what happens when you actually step into that reality? David drew lots from an urn, and a rotating clock of human effort began. The tired priests handed over heavy iron keys, and the fire on the altar was kept alive. The watchmen stood guard in the freezing dark, and the lethal boundary of holiness was maintained, away from the apocalyptic visions of the first century, and step into the dusty administrative ledger of a dying king. Because before 24 was a heavenly reality. 288 singers struck their harps, and a wall of sound protected the sanctuary. The Roman fires melted the earthly replica, and the ancient shifts were permanently shattered. An exiled apostle looked through a torn sky, and the true engine of heaven was revealed. The heavy veil ripped from top to bottom, and the exhausting rotation of humanity finally stopped. Same number, same watch. But here is the part I keep coming back to. The exhausted priests exchanging those iron keys on a Friday afternoon. Their white linen was stained with blood. Their hands were black with soot. They had to leave the courtyard because their bodies simply could not handle another hour of the holy. They were desperate to sleep. They did not realize their exhaustion was a prophecy. If you are in a season where your spiritual life feels like a brutal rotation, where you are terrified that if you drop the harp, the music stops, or if you close your eyes, the fire goes out, the 24 elders are a place to breathe. The throne room is not a shift you have to work. It is a rest you are invited to enter. You are not the guard. You do not hold the keys. The watch is already covered. It has been covered since before you were born, and it will be covered long after you are gone. If this lifted a heavy burden for you, subscribe. Leave a comment, even one word helps. The salt is thick in the air. The wind is loud. And his body carries the scars of a Roman boiling pot. It was a very specific earthly assignment. And the detail hiding in plain sight is what they were actually assigned to do. Share this with someone who treats their faith like an exhausted night shift. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who has never once abandoned the watch give you the grace to drop your heavy keys, step away from the fire, and finally find your rest. A dry, cracking parchment filled with endless lists of names. That is what you find when you unroll the middle chapters of 1 Chronicles. Most readers skip these pages entirely. They are dense genealogical records, lists of the sons of Aaron, the descendants of Eleazar, the families of Ithamar. It reads like the administrative archives of a forgotten bureaucracy. But hiding inside this ledger is the blueprint for how heaven intersects with earth. David is an old king whose wars are over. He is preparing to hand the throne to his son, Solomon, and with it, the architectural plans for the first permanent temple in Jerusalem. For centuries, the presence of God had dwelt in a tent, moving through the desert, shifting with the wind. Now, it is about to be anchored in heavy limestone and cedar. But a stone building is just an empty cavern without the human engine required to run it. By David's time, the priesthood has grown massive. There are thousands of descendants of Aaron, far too many to serve in the sanctuary. At the same time, if they all showed up at once, the courtyard would be chaos. So David brings the leaders together. He takes an urn, drops in the stones used for casting lots, and begins to draw them out, one by one. To establish a strict rotation, he divides the priests. He is the last one left. Every other apostle is dead, murdered by the empire that now holds him captive on this barren island, into exactly 24 groups. You can hear the stones rattling. You can see the scribe pressing a reed stylus into the parchment, recording the names as the lots are drawn. The house of Jehoiarib is first, Jedaiah is second, Harim is third, on and on, until 24 distinct families are assigned their permanent place in the roster. This division is not an administrative convenience. It is a theological statement. Because there are 24 groups, and because the Hebrew lunar calendar organizes the year into roughly 48 weeks, the math dictates a perfect symmetry. Each of the 24 divisions will leave their hometowns and travel to Jerusalem to serve in the temple for exactly 1 week, twice a year. During the 3 major pilgrimage festivals, all 24 divisions will serve together. David is not just building a sanctuary, he is building a clock. The 24 divisions guarantee that the fire on the massive bronze altar will never go out. They ensure that the bread of the presence is always fresh, that the incense is always rising, that the heavy veil is always guarded. The number 24 becomes the mechanism that makes unceasing worship possible in a world governed by human exhaustion. God does not sleep, but humans do. The 24 divisions solve the problem of human limitation, but this administrative ledger only tells you the theory. To fix evantide, to feel the weight of what these 24 divisions actually did, you cannot just read the list. He looks up from the dirt, and the prison vanishes. The sky tears open. He does not see a peaceful cloud. You have to stand at the heavy bronze gates of the Temple Mount on a Friday afternoon, just before the sun goes down. The sun touches the western ridge of Mount Moriah. Shadows stretch long and sharp across the white limestone. The air is heavy. It smells of roasting meat, cedar smoke, and oxidized copper. The courtyard is loud. The bleating of lambs, the clashing of heavy bronze basins, the dull thud of bare feet on stone. A silver trumpet shatters the noise. The blast echoes off the massive temple walls. It is the signal. The Sabbath is beginning. The outgoing division of priests is exhausted. Their white linen garments are stained with blood. Their hands are black with soot. For 7 days, they have not left the sanctuary courts. They have lifted heavy carcasses. They have shoveled hot ashes. They have stood barefoot on freezing pavement in the dark. They are finished. But the fire on the great bronze altar must not go out. The smoke must keep rising. The divine presence cannot be left unattended. So the next group steps forward. They march up the southern steps. They cross the threshold. They meet the outgoing priests in the court of the Israelites. For a few hours on the Sabbath, both divisions occupy the courtyard at the same time. They stand shoulder to shoulder, the old guard and the new guard, the exhausted and the rested, the blood-stained and the clean. He sees a throne room ringed by lightning, shaking with thunder, pulsing with the colors of emerald and fire. They exchange no pleasantries. They exchange the heavy iron keys to the courtyard gates. They exchange the specialized tools of the altar. The outgoing priests serve the morning sacrifice. The incoming priests take over for the evening sacrifice. The outgoing priests take their portion of the ancient bread. They turn their backs to the sanctuary. They walk down the steps and go home. One group steps down. The other steps up. They sweep the ashes. They stack the wood. They pour the wine. They arrange the fresh loaves. The rhythm never breaks. The machinery never stalls. The 24 divisions are not a schedule. They are a continuous pulse. If the pulse stops, the connection fractures. The presence of God requires a constant host, and human bodies are fragile. They tire, they break, they sleep. The 24 divisions solve the problem of human frailty by turning fragmented human effort into an unbroken chain of service. When the rest of the nation goes dark, torches blaze in the inner courts. When the farmers in Galilee close their eyes, the priests in Jerusalem stay awake. They walk the perimeter. They trim the wicks of the golden lampstand. They keep the embers burning. Every week, division replaces division. Every week, the 24 keep the engine running. But to understand the spiritual weight of what they are actually doing in the dark, and circling that central seat of cosmic authority are 24 other thrones. On them sit 24 elders, dressed in white, wearing crowns of gold. You cannot just look at their physical actions. You have to look at the specific Hebrew word the author of Chronicles uses to describe them. Read 1 Chronicles chapter 24 inches, a standard English translation, and you will see language that feels distinctly administrative. The text says that David organized the descendants of Aaron into divisions, course, or groups. It sounds like a corporate manager drafting a quarterly schedule. But the ancient Hebrew text carries a completely different frequency. It is not the language of the boardroom. It is the language of the battlefield. The word the author of Chronicles uses to describe these 24 groups is the Hebrew mishmar. It appears repeatedly in this text, and its range of meaning is heavier than you might expect. The root is the verb shamar, which means to keep, to guard, to protect, or to watch over. And the noun mishmar translates literally as a guard, a watch, a ward, or a watchpost. It is the exact same word used in the book of Nehemiah when the builders set a mishmar, a night watch, on the crumbling stone walls of Jerusalem, gripping iron spears in the dark to look out for enemy armies. It is the same word used in the book of Genesis for a warden. They fall down. They cast their crowns on the glassy floor. They rise. They do it again. Every time the lightning flashes, the number remains the same, 24, keeping watch over an Egyptian dungeon. That root changes everything. When David establishes the 24 groups, He is not just managing human resources. He is stationing sentries. These men are not administrators. They are guards. The division is not a schedule. It is a defensive perimeter. You have to understand how the ancient Israelites viewed the temple. The Holy of Holies was not just a quiet room for prayer. It was the localized epicenter of the Creator's presence on earth. And, in the Hebrew scriptures, that presence is highly volatile. It is like an exposed nuclear reactor. It is beautiful. And it is lethal. The 24 Mishmar were the containment field. They were guarding the boundary line between the holy and the profane. They were keeping watch to ensure that the searing purity of God did not break out against an impure people, and that the impurity of the world did not defile the sanctuary. If uncovering the military architecture beneath a boring administrative list is shifting how you read these ancient texts, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the 24 watches hold the line. They stand at the heavy wooden doors. They pace the stone courtyards in the freezing night. Most people read the book of Revelation and assume this number is just apocalyptic poetry, a random assembly of heavenly VIPs. Or maybe it is. The 24 Mishmar ensure that the watch is never abandoned. Not for a single hour of the solar year. But the priests, with their sacrificial knives, were not the only ones divided into 24. There was a second group required to keep the temple engine running, and they did not hold iron keys, or bronze tools, or heavy wooden gates. They held something much louder. Bronze cymbals crash against each other. The sound fractures the morning air. The ground beneath the white limestone pavement literally vibrates. The air is thick with the smell of burning cedar, but the noise cuts right through the smoke. The sound is a physical weight in the courtyard. You do not just hear it. You carry it in your chest and in your jaw. 288 men stand in the courtyard. They hold lyres of carved wood. They hold 10-stringed harps. They fill their lungs with the thin air of Mount Moriah. And they release a sound so massive, it echoes across the Kidron Valley. Most people assume the priests with the sacrificial knives did all the heavy lifting. But David knew that blood and fire were not enough to host the divine presence. The temple needed a different kind of boundary. It needed a wall of sound. In 1 Chronicles, chapter 25, right after the heavy administrative list of the 24 priestly watches, the scribes record a second roster. Just a simple math equation. The 12 patriarchs of the Old Testament added to the 12 apostles of the New. David takes the master musicians, the sons of Asaph, the sons of Heman, the sons of Jeduthun. These are the men who wrote the Psalms. These are the men who tracked the stars. The men who understood the brutal weight of human suffering and the terrifying scale of divine glory. He gathers them. He brings the urn. He casts the lots. The stones fall on the parchment. The first lot, the second, the third, all the way to 24. 24 groups of musicians. Exactly 12 men in each group. 288 masters of song, assigned to perfectly mirror the 24 watches of the priests. The architecture of the sanctuary requires both of them working in absolute synchronicity. When the first division of priests steps up to the altar, the first division of singers steps up to the platform. The priest raises the bronze knife. The singer raises the wooden harp. The priest manages the fire. The singer manages the frequency. The priest offers the blood. The singer offers the breath. This is not background music. It is spiritual infrastructure. The author of Chronicles uses a specific phrase to describe what these musicians are doing in the courtyard. He says they are prophesying with lyres, with harps, and with cymbals. They are not entertaining the pilgrims who have walked for weeks to get to Jerusalem.